Good morning, St. Andrew family, and welcome to our Sunday morning online worship service. I'm Justin Bullis, and it is my privilege to welcome you here today from the St. Andrew Sanctuary. I am grateful, as always, to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. St. Andrew is proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here, and you belong here. Please take a moment to visit gostandrew.com/sign-in to let us know that you're here and to share some information about yourself. We'd love to know from where or from when you're joining us, or if you have any prayer requests or questions about our church. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the work God is doing in and through our community, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We would love to hear from you. Also, be sure to check out the announcement slides at the beginning and end of this video to see some upcoming events and opportunities to get more involved in the St. Andrew community. You can also visit the events page on our website to see an updated events calendar. Lastly, if you would like to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now let's listen together as Reverend Mark brings us the second sermon in our new sermon series, What Does the Lord Require of You? Justice, Kindness, and Humility for the Common Good.
But what happens when we live God's way? He brings gifts into our lives, much the same way that fruit appears in an orchard. Things like affection for others, exuberance about life, serenity. We develop a willingness to stick with things, a sense of compassion in the heart, and a conviction that a basic holiness permeates things and people. We find ourselves involved in loyal commitments, not needing to force our way in life, able to marshal and direct our energies wisely. Legalism is helpless in bringing this about. It only gets in the way. Among those who belong to Christ, everything connected with getting our own way and mindlessly responding to what everyone else calls necessities is called off for good, crucified. Since this is the kind of life we have chosen, the life of the Spirit, let us make sure that we do not just hold it as an idea in our heads or a sentiment in our hearts, but work out its implications in every detail of our lives. That means we'll not compare ourselves to each other as if one of us were better and another worse. We have far more interesting things to do with our lives. Each of us is an original.
Back when Lori and I were living in San Diego, we had this old, thorny, pitiful tree in our backyard. It sat glumly between two tall, regal queen palms, and by all accounts seemed so unhappy and grouchy and prickly. In fact, if you looked at the tree straight on, it appeared as if its branches had folded over themselves in exasperation, the way a grumpy person might cross one arm over the other in bitter frustration. And every time I walked past that tree, it would casually unfold its arms and stealthily reach out and scratch me with its needle-like thorns. It was that kind of tree. The previous owner had said he thought it might be some kind of fruit tree, but never once did it bear any fruit. In fact, rarely did it ever even sprout more than a dozen leaves at a time. He never got around to cutting it down. And for 3 years, I patiently endured that tree's prickly persecution whenever I mowed the lawn, until one day when I finally had enough. I brought out the lopper and the pruning shears and went to work on that tree with great enthusiasm. I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't care. It turned out to be this long and grueling battle with a lot of back and forth. The tree landed countless piercing jabs every time I went in for a lop. By the time it was over, I was a bloody mess, and that tree looked like a gangly piece of driftwood stuck loosely in the earth. I watered and fertilized it, even as Lori prophesied that I had surely killed it. But the following spring it happened. For the first time in untold years, new buds appeared on those once folded, pouting arms, followed by an abundance of green, satiny leaves. Before long, dozens and dozens of white blossoms began bursting towards sunlight and air and flyby pollinators. And weeks later, that old tree produced a harvest of plump, juicy limes. I thought of that old lime tree as I read from Galatians 5 this week about the so-called fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. How do these grow out of the human heart? From where do they come? The lesson of that old lime tree suggests that whenever we do not see these fruits of the Spirit blossoming in us or out in the world, it's because we've neglected the tree, both beneath the surface and above it. This neglect is how the human spirit dies. This neglect is how the whole soul of a society dies. How is our tree doing? Jesus once said you can judge a tree by the fruit it produces. Good fruit, bad fruit, no fruit at all. He called us to always look at our personal lives and the world that we live in, and to ask ourselves, where in my life is there evidence of good things like love, joy, and peace? Where in the world are there signs of patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, in our words and our actions, in our encounters with others, in our families and neighborhoods and churches, in our public and political arenas? And where is there a lack of evidence of these fruits? The truth is, no one can give us these fruits of the Spirit. They have to be grown. We can't suddenly make ourselves more loving or joyful or patient or kind in a given moment any more than we can make an old tree produce a fresh lime on demand. Because Mother Nature doesn't work that way, and neither does human nature. Whenever we see a lack of love or joy, kindness, wherever instead we see hatred, unkindness, unpeace, and ruthlessness, we know the tree is unwell. In our passage from Galatians, the Apostle Paul is writing to a community in major turmoil. People are, quote, devouring one another over whether to be a Christian one must live by the letter of the law, that is the Jewish law, or by the Spirit of love. There are some in Galatia who believe that by following all the ancient rules of the Hebrew covenant, they will gain God's acceptance and approval. And this is an awful trap people fall in even today. Follow the rules and God will love you. Break the rules and God will reject you. Humans have such a strong and overactive disapproval gland. We're always hustling for love and affirmation, especially from God. But this kind of faith that ties God's approval to our rule following, it can be exhausting and defeating because there's simply no way anyone can fulfill the entire law. We will eventually fail. We'll inevitably blow it. And when we do, that's when we'll fear and run from the very one whose love can redeem us. And in this way, the law, it turns out, actually drives us further away from God. Trying to please God, to win God's approval, it will never ever produce fruit like joy, peace, and kindness. It will only leave us more empty because abundance never grows from a place of neediness. So Paul writes to the Galatians and he says, there's only one way to know and experience God's approval. It's a way that's not at all about following rules and being perfect, but it's about God's grace, which frees you from the pressure of having to be perfect. This grace, as he calls it, is the love and approval and acceptance of God that is given to you before you do anything at all. This upfront, given in advance acceptance that frees you from having to please God in order to earn God's love. It allows you instead to live by the Spirit of divine love. That is, to live and act from a place of abundance instead of neediness. Paul's saying that only when we are planted in God's grace, instead of our human neediness, only then can we bear good fruit. Things like love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, all those fruits of the Spirit. If it's true that you can judge a tree by the fruit it produces, and that good fruit can only come from God's grace, what about the tree that is you? Are the fruits of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, generosity, faithfulness, and self-control, are these evidenced in your words and actions? Do others perceive these fruits growing in you? This is where our faith can play a vital role in our political lives. Our faith can ensure that it can't ensure that our team wins. It can't ensure that our ideas or ideologies prevail. But our faith will determine whether we can indeed love alike, even when we can't think alike. Whether we can promote more light than heat in this world. If we are ever to bear any fruits of the Spirit in this polarized world of ours, we have to together agree to two common commitments as people of faith. The first commitment is to crack the seed coat of our souls. Did you know that every seed has a thin, waxy coat on it? This seed coat protects the embryo of the seed, the most precious and vulnerable part of the seed. It also transmits information to the seed about the environment, things like temperature and pressure and moisture. Eventually, for growth to happen, the seed coat must be cracked. Has the seed coat of your soul been cracked? Are you working on that vital part of you that lies beneath the surface of the soil? Woodrow Wilson once said, "Your rootage is more important than your leafage." How's your rootage? Are you drawing daily from the abundance of God's grace that reminds you that you are beloved and accepted? Because it's impossible to bear the fruit of love in a polarized and impassioned world if the implanted seed of God's love has not cracked open within you. Love only grows from a place of love. Martin Luther King Jr. had this unique vision for how to live and act politically in the face of deep societal division. His leadership in the civil rights movement was distinct from anyone who came before him, and frankly, nearly anyone who has ever come after him. King centered his Christian faith and the radical teachings of Jesus in everything he did and said. He saw in the life of Jesus a non-negotiable, unwavering commitment to nonviolence in all its forms. Those who desired to be a part of King's movement, they all had to agree to avoid, quote, external physical violence as well as internal violence of the spirit. Refusing to strike back physically against the opponent, that wasn't enough. One had to refuse to villainize and otherize, humiliate, condemn, or hate the opponent. This seems so unreasonable, maybe even impossible, in today's political climate. Try it at your Thanksgiving dinner table, or in the break room at the office, or in your neighborhood cul-de-sac when politics comes up and it's clear there's some strong disagreement. In that moment, can you resist the sudden impulse toward what King called the internal violence of spirit? Can you tap into that deep reservoir of God's grace instead of that empty place of neediness? When people asked to join the movement, King insisted that they sign a pledge. The simplicity and beauty of that pledge is brilliant and timeless. In fact, we should all sign it today. Meditate daily on the teachings and life of Jesus. Remember always that the movement seeks justice and reconciliation, not victory. Walk and talk in the manner of love, for God is love. Pray daily to be used by God in order that all might be free. Sacrifice personal wishes in order that all might be free. Observe with both friend and foe the ordinary rules of courtesy. Seek to perform regular service for others and for the world. Refrain from the violence of fist, tongue, or heart. And strive to be in good spiritual and bodily health. These commitments of King's were remarkably Wesleyan, by the way. John Wesley's Methodist movement was grounded in what he called acts of piety and acts of mercy, the inward and outward path of spiritual practice that cultivates the rootage of our spirit. Prayer, acts of devotion and worship, along with service and acts of mercy and compassion. None of these are politically useful in the heat of an argument. They'll almost always ensure that you will lose an argument with your crazy uncle at the dinner table over my immigration or the economy. But what they will always, always bear is the fruit of the Spirit, like joy and peace, gentleness and self-control, before you even get to that argument. And notice, by the way, what's not on King's list. Things like meditate daily on cable news commentaries, or observe a daily practice of reading and posting inflammatory memes on Facebook, or engage in snarky Twitter warfare. Commit to growing your spirit beneath the surface of the soil, and you'll bear the fruit of the Spirit above it. So much of our political debate in America is so proudly infused with God and country, but so painfully devoid of spirit and truth. For so many, the seed coat just never cracked open. And you look for the fruit, and it's not there. In his book, Strive Toward Freedom, King wrote about all the death threats, about 40 calls a day to his home, threatening to kill him and his family. And one night, King came home. His family was asleep. He slumped into a chair and he prayed to God. He said to God, I'm at the end of my powers. I have nothing left. I've come to the point where I can't face it alone. And then he heard an inner voice say to him, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and God will be at your side forever. And his doubt dissolved, his uncertainty disappeared. He was ready to face anything, because the seed coat of his soul had cracked. The fruit of the Spirit could grow. Peace in the storm, faithfulness in uncertainty, joy in the darkness, gentleness amid the violence. Crack the seed coat. Get to work on what's beneath the soil. And our second commitment is to welcome the pollinators. This is the work we do above the surface of the soil. Pollination is key to creating flowers and bearing fruit. Bees and birds and butterflies and beetles and bats, they all remind us that there are no fruits of the Spirit without us buzzing around each other, without us getting the pollen of life on our hands and faces. There's no fruit unless we welcome and encounter others, even those who seem so very different than us, those who may come and go and yet leave a little bit of themselves behind. There's no fruit without us becoming vulnerable with others and dependent on each other. And all of that happens, the pollination, the growth, the bearing of new fruit, it happens through real physical encounter, through generous conversations, through the sharing of stories, and through acts and moments of patience and kindness, generosity. In our current climate, we often confuse engagement with endorsement. We assume that if we talk to the other side, we're somehow validating or legitimizing what we find disagreeable. But curiosity doesn't mean consonance. Engagement doesn't mean endorsement. But what it does imply is a healthy humility, that there's always something to learn, if not some new truth, at least a new story. Maybe a new story about why or how someone came to think the way they actually think. We can't do that if the flower is closed. If we're truly drawing life and strength from the light and love of the Spirit, there's nothing to fear in welcoming the pollinators. You just have to be bigger than you are. This culture of encounter and curiosity, it is the antidote to the isolation and the tribalism we all feel today. This week I came across a recording of a famous musician's bass guitar track to a popular song from many years ago. The musician's track had been isolated from the other tracks of his fellow musicians in that song so that all you can hear is the sound of this single bass guitar thumping and humming to a famous but indistinguishable tune. That recorded track on its own was actually pretty bad. It was a bit like a middle school music recital. The musician, it turned out, was Paul McCartney, one of the greatest bassists of all time, in one of the greatest bands of all time. And the song was Hello, Goodbye, one of the Beatles' many great hits. You'd never know, just by listening only to that bass track, that song would be such a big hit. Why? Because we don't listen to the tracks in isolation. Because human beings are drawn to harmonies. Solo bass tracks, I'm sorry, they're just not very interesting. We do our best work whenever we experience the tension that comes from the contributions of others, from working together. That's why we listen to the whole song and not one musician's isolation track. Because we need pollinators. Without them, there can be no fruit. Our takeaways for today: be planted in God's grace, and you will bear good fruit. Crack open the seed coat of your soul and welcome the pollinators.
Instrument of peace. instrument of peace, an instrument of peace. Lord, make me an instrument of peace, an instrument of peace.
Hello everyone, my name is Untitled. I'm the Family Liaison at East Elementary. As the Family Liaison, I help build relationships with families and assist with finding resources for children and families, such as food and clothing. In addition to this, I help parents connect with school staff. St. Andrew has been an important part of our community for many years. We have volunteers from your congregation who come to the school on a near daily basis. Volunteers assist with our homework club, mentoring program, and the Big Serve Day, which is a valuable and important day at East. This year, the volunteers painted the fence at the front of the school and made it look amazing. During the school year, we also received weekly food bags for many families in need, as well as meals for the holidays. In addition, we received diapers for families through efforts of one of our staff members at East, who is also part of the St. Andrew congregation. I know that if any of the families need something extra, clothes, gift cards for groceries, or anything else, St. Andrew is a supportive partner of ours and will help in any way that you can. Our families are very thankful for all of you. During the upcoming school year, we are partnering with St. Andrew to open a food market with the donations of food and other items from the amazing St. Andrew community. The opening of the market will take place of the weekly food bags. This food market will immensely help our families in need. We are looking forward to serving our families in this way. This upcoming school year will mark the last year East Elementary will be open as a school. We will be merging with another school in the district. In its place, a community center will open and will not only serve the students and families of Littleton Public Schools, but the entire community. We hope that the food market will continue to serve those in need for years and years to come. From the bottom of my heart, gracias to every one of you.
And now, as you return to the rhythms and routines of your busy lives this week, I leave you with this benediction from spreadjesus.org. O bounteous Spirit, I ask you to bring forth in my life your fruits, the fruit of love, so that I may love you above all things and all others for your sake, the fruit of joy, that I may find my delight in your service, the fruit of peace, that I may be pardoned through your mercy and may rest in your love, the fruit of long-suffering, so that I may bear with patience all afflictions, the fruit of gentleness, that I may subdue all anger and take calmly and sweetly all trials and provocations, the fruit of meekness, that I may forgive freely all who have hurt me, and endure with patience all burdens that are laid upon me, the fruit of temperance, that I may restrain all my desires, and bring them into the subjection of your holy will. Amen.